All right, very welcome to our webinar. We will get started in 4 minutes, so please just hang in there and we will be back soon. All right, so we will get started in 3 minutes. Hang in there. All right, very welcome to this webinar about leadership during the Corona crisis. With us today, we have a very experienced panel. We have David Wheldon, former CMO of Royal Bank of Scotland. We have Anne Glover, that is the CEO of Amadeus Capital. We have Tom Nyman, that is chairman of the board at Netigate. And we have Berta Maso, that is an expert in people and culture. So very welcome to this webinar. Before we get started, a little bit about Netigate. We work with feedback. We have many companies working with gathering feedbacks from the two most important assets, clients and employees. So if you're curious about us, please enter our website and ask for a demo, ask for a meeting. We are happy to share more information about ourselves and how we could help you. So about housekeeping, I'm going to be in the background when we start the presentation. I also have a colleague in place called Natasha Ellis-Knight. So we will run the technical things in the background. So if you have any feedback and if it's something that is not working for you, please reach out to us and we will try to help you as best as we can. There's also in the chat box a little sticky note for you. So we work with feedback. We would love to hear your feedback around this webinar. So please share that with us before you leave today. So that's everything I had for the introduction. And we will have the speaker talking for 5 minutes each about 5 tips they have around leadership during the Corona crisis. And the first person to go is Anne Glover. So as I mentioned, Anne is the CEO of Amadeus Capital. And I think also Anne has been involved in many other crises than the Corona crisis. Anne, are you with me? You're muted at the moment. Let me see. It's a lot of...
It's fine. Sorry, I had to turn both on. Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Yes, this is my 4th crisis it sounded the way you put it, Sophie, that crises follow me around. Sometimes I think that could be true. But it's my 4th crisis. It's by far and away the deepest and most global, but it's probably the one which tech has managed to ride out the best. And I'm a technology investor. So from a CEO perspective, because I am the founder and CEO of Amadeus, I think the first and the most important lesson is to stay calm. The world is obviously changing all around us all the time, but we need a clear head in order to be able to think through how to react. And it's very, very important to over-communicate. And what I mean over-communicate, it's to employees, to clients, to suppliers, repeating the message, keeping people up to date, being calm and stating your position and knowing where you're going is really important because it gives people confidence in you as a leader. Now I'm trying to move on to the next slide. Let's see if I can do that. Yes, the second slide is point is to revise all your plans. It's really a time for bottom-up planning. Decide on a scenario, look at everything that is going on, and don't be afraid to think radically because that is, in fact, what's needed at a time of crisis. Related to that is, I'm trying to see if I can move this on. It's not, I'm not sure how that I'm getting the right instructions to move. Yes, thank you. Related to this bottom-up planning is to establish a central scenario. You'll need to think widely about both positive and negative outcomes, but a central scenario which you can then act decisively around, if that means deciding how you're going to deal with your property or your staff or your suppliers. It's really important to develop this clear central plan and act decisively. The next slide, please. Your assets are really your people. I mean, I think that's true in all organizations, but it's sometimes forgotten in a moment of crisis. So it's really important to focus on well-being, morale, and listen. I mean, people react very differently to crises. There'll be 20% that are really put into a tailspin. There'll be 20% who take charge and help you out, and then there'll be 60% who are waiting to hear what the plan is. So expect a wide range of reactions and listen to them and treat them as all legitimate, because they are all legitimate. People have a different response to external crises than each other, and this is a time that's not normal. And last point, in addition to staying calm, it's really important to stay optimistic. This too will pass. I mean, it's an old, apparently Persian saying that basically was put forward at a time when one of their cities was under great threat and about to be completely destroyed. But we do know that the world operates on a pendulum in all ways, and this too will pass, and we will get to better times in due course. But we have to set our sails fair for a fairly long period, I would say, now of recovery. So my messages would apply not just at the depth of a crisis, but probably for the next year. So thank you very much. Sophie, I think you're muted.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much for your 5 tips. We will come back to you after everyone has presented their 5 tips. So next person in line is Tom Nyman. He is chairman of the board at Netigate, and I will hand over straight to Tom.
Okay, thank you very much. So overall, each company has its challenges during this corona crisis. Some companies may have major challenges with tremendous growth due to the consequence of the corona crisis, but whereas other companies may have lost 90 to 100% of their revenue. So there is no one size fits all for the board. While the management focus on quick decisions to protect and secure employees and customers, the board also need to think long term. So here are my 5 tips. The first one is the board needs to act both as a sparring partner and advisor in the corona times that contains both financial and human challenges. It's about protecting the employees and the customers. For instance, make sure that the employees can work from home. And this is, of course, handled by the management, but the board has an important role as a sounding board on these issues. Here, the company needs to show great sympathy for the employees affected by the crisis. Next, please. So the board needs to be continuously followed and involved in the crisis plan that the management has prepared. And for instance, the board can update the management. The management can update the board on a weekly basis on the most important issues. Could, for example, be the cash situation, overdue accounts receivable, the sales situation, layoffs, communication, employee morale, etc. This is mainly about getting through the crisis. The next one, consider all stakeholders. The board needs to support and make decisions on various issues regarding external stakeholders. It could be, for instance, investors, banks, and government. Should a dividend be reduced or cancelled? Should, for instance, how do you decide on different packages from the government, from the authorities? Strategic financial issues, strategic communication, suppliers, forecast if you're a listed company, for instance. So in other words, the board must conduct a 360 analysis to ensure that all stakeholders are handled during the crisis. The fourth is to look at all the experience from the previous crisis. Since the board members are often senior and have a lot of experience from other crises, like Anne mentioned, for different crises, it could be like the 2008 crisis, could be September 11, and this could of course provide great support for the management, lesson learned from other crises, even though this crisis is unique into large parts. It's important for the board, with its experience for another crisis, to give the management confidence that the company will get through the crisis, a little bit like Anne said, being optimistic. And if possible, even advise how to improve the position for the company, meaning coming out relatively stronger than before the crisis. And the last but not least is to think both short and long term. In short term, of course, the board and of course the management need to have control of the cash and the financial situation. Of course, secure employees and customers, the most important asset for the company. But while the management is busy with the crisis management, the board must also think long term. Is there a need for the strategic plan to be revised, digitalization, etc.? Here, the board should work for the company to, if possible, take the opportunity to make improvements. This may relate to product development, i.e. to improve the company's position. Can the company afford to increase the spending on product development, for instance? Digitalization of the company may also be needed to intensify and to take the opportunity to, if possible, accelerate this change. So that was my 5 things. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tom. Me and Tom are both at Netigate, so we actually share the room today with this webinar. And we have David Wheldon that will go next and talk about the CMO perspective. And David is the former CMO of Royal Bank of Scotland. I don't know, David, have you been through any crisis during
Look at the color. Look at the color of my hair. I've been through all the 4 that Anne has as well, and many others of smaller nature. So good afternoon, everybody. My 5 tips here come from the perspective of marketing leadership. I should give absolute clarity around. I have watched this particular crisis through the lens of slow living because I stepped down from my role in March. I've been talking to lots of people, watching what's happening. And the key first point is focus on your people, for all the reasons that Anne said. Take care of them, make sure you're communicating regularly. Internal communication is absolutely key here because everybody's responding in a different way and you need people to get the work done. So first, people. Second, Sophie, I think you're clicking for me, please. Second point. Use all the data you can. First of all, historic data is important for a marketeer here because if you look back across crises, there's data all the way back to the Great Depression that shows that those brands that invested through a crisis emerged stronger with a larger market share post a crisis. And what I'm sure all you marketeers are finding is that people are rushing for the red pen to reduce any discretionary spend. Use data to fight that when it's right. Also use data to focus on your customers and how they're feeling, and make sure you anchor all of your decisions in the facts that data bring you. My third one is prioritization. Let me insert the word ruthlessly prioritize in front of this. Everybody will have started with a plan for the year. That will of course been revised several times, I imagine. But I think what the crisis has given people is a real opportunity to look deeply at the efficacy of marketing and get that ruthless prioritization going to make sure the plan delivers against the company's needs. My fourth point is you need a very clear narrative, both internally and externally. And again, I know I'm repeating here, communication is a good thing, but getting clear what your messaging externally and internally is and sticking to it helps people, and I'm afraid we only have to look at our government here in the UK to see the failings of a poor narrative. And my final point, number 5, I think these behaviours are the ones that are crucial for leaders to focus on here. The humanity to recognize that this is difficult for all sorts of people. You know, people are being furloughed, people are losing their jobs. This is not a crisis which is shared equally. It's a crisis that is more difficult for some than others. Humility, because there's always a lot to learn and it's a time to be quiet and listen and focus. Agility, because you need to move fast and respond and change things. And then from a personal perspective, resilience. So I also hear people are getting Zoom burnout, Teams burnout, and ironically, this tech that is enabling us to do this, if it's all you do all day long, the net, I'm told, is it's more tiring than actually a normal day's work, not least because there's no sidebar breaks and chats and so on. So those are my 5. Thank you very much, Sophie. Back to you.
Thank you so much, David, for your great tips with a marketing perspective. And next person to go is Berta Maso. She's expert in people and culture. Berta, you're actually based in Italia, near from the Switzerland border.
Yes, I'm switching between both countries every day.
So we have a very European panel today. So maybe you want to go next and a little bit about yourself as well.
Yes. So my background is in HR. I worked 20 years in HR in different countries and cities across Europe and the Middle East. I have lived and worked in London. Then I went to Kuwait and Dubai. And then I came to Switzerland and now I'm in Italy. My industry is fashion retail, which regrettably is one of the industries which have been impacted the most by this crisis. We have had retailer stores being closed for the past 2-3 months. Merchandise that were well on their ways to the stores that have had to go back to the brands. Orders that have been cancelled at the very last minute. So if you are an up-and-coming brand and you are not supported by a big group, then you're going to really be in trouble during these times. So my 5 tips from a HR perspective, I realize that they are all around soft skills. And HR has been long preaching about the importance of soft skills. And soft skills have now become more important than ever. So number 1, coach your teams. Your line managers are finding themselves in a situation that is not familiar for them. The leadership competencies are being tested in areas that never before. They haven't really been trained to overcome this. So they need their leaders by their side. Keep showing up for them, be the sounding board, support them, be present, and help them to prioritize and refocus, because our world has changed overnight. So it's easy to be distracted and it's easy to be confused, and people need of their leaders to help them to reprioritize and refocus. React quickly. So our focus and the strategy has changed overnight from making revenue and gaining market share. We have gone into cost controlling and trying to keep the company afloat and maintaining liquidity. So it is about how do we support our people whose roles and responsibilities and objectives have actually changed overnight. Agility and resourcefulness are key ingredients to help you navigate through the chaos. So, and obviously I'm talking very much from a retail perspective. So operations have been challenging, to say the least. A limited, reduced teams, supply chains that have been blocked, technical issues. And so in order to keep that wheel turning, people will need to think and So, and this possibly is connect emotionally with your teams and clients. Empathy is important. And for me, I mean, I put it in the number 4 point, but for me, this is the number 1. And I'm so very much thrilled that my peers have mentioned this and have put people at the center. These are really difficult times. People are confused. People are scared. People are very stressed. This is a world that we can't relate to any longer. This is a world that has changed so fastly that we are struggling to catch up with it. We are a little bit in limbo. And so you just need to listen. Be close to your teams. Listen to their fears. The reality, and let's not hide it. There's going to be a lot of people losing their jobs. I don't think we have seen it all yet. There are certain countries in Europe, such as Italy, Spain, and France, where terminations have been forbidden throughout the crisis, the emergency crisis. But for example, in Italy, this is going to be lifted towards the end of August. So I think that after the August and the summer holidays, we're going to go back in September and we're going to really have to face the music. So how are we going to do this? HR departments at the moment are very much swamped by legal issues. They're very much focused on the outcome and focused on keeping the bottom line that is going to help the company to stay afloat. And so it is very easy for these HR departments to actually not look after the process. And so for me, this is a call for us to not neglect the process. Yes, we're going to have to make a lot of people redundant. Yes, we're going to have to reduce headcounts, but look after the process. How are you going to make this happen? How are you going to get these people out the door? And what are you going to do to support them to move on? What are you going to do in order to help them to transition with their career? And I think, of course, HR departments, possibly this is the last thing in their minds right now, but I think there is some tools out there that companies can make use of that can help people to actually move on with their careers. And communicate some more. So this is another tip that you have heard from my peers already. The reality is that when we don't know the answers, when we don't know what's going to happen, we tend to not communicate because what are we going to say? We don't really know what's going to happen. We're waking up every day to different news, different legislations. But you know what? You don't really need to know the answers to everything. You just need to show up and be genuine and say, hey, we don't really know what's going on, but we are working towards that. We don't have all the answers, but we will have the answers for you. And make sure that you touch base with everyone so often because everyone is working from home. So you really need to maintain that connection with everyone who works in your organization. So that's it, Sophie. I'm back to you.
Thank you so much, Berta. So now we have had 4 shorter presentations, and I think the full panel can go on webcam now. I have also sent out a poll for you that listens to this webinar. So the question for you should be able to see it on your right-hand corner. And the question I have for you is, has your company set up designated communication channels and protocols for managing the impact of Corona? And you have 3 alternatives. Yes, no, but we plan to, no, and there are no plans. So you could please go ahead and choose your answer there, and we could be a little bit interactive. Please also send in questions for the panel. And let me see. So We're waiting for the poll to finish. So let's start with my first question to Anne. How do you make sure departments do not work in silos?
Yeah, it's very difficult because there is that tendency. I mean, one thing we do is we are having a weekly all hands webinar Zoom meeting. So literally everyone, it's like a town hall. We never used to do it. This is a direct result of the coronavirus crisis, and it enables people to talk about what they're doing and also their lives. So that's helped because it's just helped in relationship building. I mean, other than that, it's really getting your leadership to recognize that they need to work across boundaries, and that's coaching them so that they think of where they can use. But it's a real problem because the physical serendipity really helps with that, and obviously, all this electronic communication is more deliberate, and therefore serendipity doesn't work as well. So I think it's hard.
Yes, thank you for that. We are waiting for some questions, I think. Let me see. Let's go over to Tom. How is the board planning for a long-term crisis?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's a good question. In general, it could be said when it comes to the medical side of this, of course, nobody knows. We might have a vaccine in 12 to 18 months. We might not have a vaccine, but at least then we have some kind of time frame to look at. When it comes to the economic side, the stock market has priced in a so-called V, meaning rapid recovery during the autumn. And of course, this would be fantastic, but it might also be a bit optimistic. If you look at the unemployment rate in, for instance, US, it's around 15%, which corresponds to around 30 million people. And that's the highest since the Great Depression in the 1930s. So that's pretty bad, actually. And you can also look, in addition to China, even if it's hard to look at the statistic, they also have a huge increase in unemployment rate, both due to the lockdown, but also due to the fact that it's a very low demand in the rest of the world now. In addition, we can also add on the so-called trade conflict between US and China, which also might accelerate as a consequence of the corona. For instance, the so-called supply chain, we're talking about moving out potential relocation of production from China to other countries. So all in all, this might also have a negative impact on the crisis. So one can be optimistic, and I think we should be optimistic, but I think we should plan for a prolonged crisis, which could take 1 or 2 or several years, actually. So I think the focus on the cash situation and financing is one of the most important points to secure the cash and the financing. Of course, we talked about before, the company must focus on the most important assets, its employee, and of course, its customers. And these are very, very important. I think also, we talked about this also, that we need to focus on culture and morale in the company, which is super important during this crisis. So, of course, these are tasks for the management, the board, but the board can contribute by supporting the management in all these issues. So I think the board must think long-term, focus on the strategy and the vision of the company. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So we actually have some questions from the audience now. We have a question for David. I will see if I can get it up, actually. People say marketing, let me see, sorry, it's a little bit hard to say. People say marketing has changed, but what are the evergreen constants for people to always remember that are as true today as when you started?
Oh, that's a great point. And to one of my favorite themes, what's changed is the number of channels available, first and foremost. What also changed is the speed of the feedback loop, which is immediate these days. And what's changed, courtesy of COVID is, difficult to measure and feel where people are because the crisis is not moving at the same speed for everybody. But marketing is what it's always been. You have to know who your audience are. You have to understand them. You have to understand what your products and services are, and you have to deliver them in the right way, especially in times like this. And actually, as I've been watching what people are doing, I really admire how some companies have flexed to the needs and do stand back every now and again in horror at what others are doing. I won't name those, but I'm sure you'll have all had the same experience. But I think it's a crucial time for marketing, absolutely crucial to get things right, crucial to work across the silos. I mean, I like Anne's point, marketing is a team game. I haven't worked in a company where everybody isn't a marketing expert. It's one of the subjects that everybody's excellent at, and indeed they can be. So the evergreen is still there, but the circumstances are tougher. But good question, or I think it was a point wrapped up as a question, but I agree with it.
Great. We have more questions from the audience, and this one is to Berta. Hi, most of you mentioned that people is the #1 asset. How do team leaders ensure that employees feel 100% secure and give their 100% best?
So security doesn't exist, but doesn't exist not even before coronavirus. I think, and this goes back to what I said before, it goes beyond to the actions or the strategies the HR departments will have to take as a result of this crisis. It is about being empathic, and ensuring that you actually support that employee from A to Z, regardless of the HR strategy that you're going to have to take as a result of this crisis. And here, the how you do things is more important than the what you're going to do. So people will lose their jobs over this. And this is something companies will have to do very regrettably if they want to save the company. And so how are you going to do that? How are you going to support that employee that is going to be losing their job is supported in order to find another job, or in order to reinvent themselves, or in order to move on with their career transition. And there is a lot that can be done, from outplacement services to career transition toolkits, a lot of development and support from a coaching perspective and a mindset perspective that you can give to those employees. So as I said before, it is focused on the process more than on the outcome.
Thank you, Berta. I think all of the panel agree that people and culture is key in this crisis. We have a question for Anne from Paul. How is the crisis affecting your investment strategy? Are you doing more due diligence or holding back on investing, or simply adapting your investment strategies?
Yeah, that's a tough one. We are lucky in the sense that we will invest at very early stage in the UK. And when you're investing at the very early stage, the due diligence is really about the people and about the technology. And those are both possible in lockdown. You can do a lot of referencing, you can do a lot of understanding of product comparisons or specifications online. It doesn't, it means that we've closed 2 new deals since the beginning of the year, and we've done 4 follow-on financings, all completing during lockdown. So I would say that our pace is slightly slower than it would have been, but really we've been keeping steady as she goes. I think the harder question is in more mature businesses where there's a revenue line and a gross margin line, and you're not quite sure how they've been impacted by the crisis. And that's much harder to do due diligence on. So I think later stage financings and buyouts have really stalled, actually, because the due diligence there is much harder to execute. But we've been very fortunate, and entrepreneurs really ignore the larger macro environment. They pop up with their ideas and their energy, even in the quietest of times. And so we think by being active, we will attract the best entrepreneurs during this phase.
Thank you, Anne. We will go to the next question in this slide deck, and that is actually we have the two questions to you, Berta. Maybe you could answer them both at the same time. But how would you know employees are informed? And also, we have a question from Caroline. What is the best way to communicate layoffs, all at once or separate for different teams?
Sorry, one at a time. And you possibly cannot see me because apparently I have a weak connection. So when the connection comes back fully, the video will be turned on. So first, how would you know employees are informed? And this is the million-dollar question, let's be honest, but not during Corona, even pre-Corona. Traditional internal communication channels have not proved to be effective, never. In this situation that people are working from remote. And as British say, out of sight, out of mind, this means that traditional communication channels are not really being effective. If on top of this, you add the fact that people have had a lot of technical issues and they haven't been able to connect to the server, and the company intranet, for all those who have it, haven't really been accessible for many, then this doesn't really help us with keeping employees informed. In addition to this, we have all witnessed our inbox being flooded by emails. Our number of emails have been possibly 3 times more. That's because emails have been substituting the face-to-face interactions. So if you sum all these, really internal communications and how we keep employees informed is really very challenging now. It was already challenging before, but now it is really very challenging. So my answer to that is I would probably go onto a software of internal communications. I think there is a lot of smart people out there that are able to spot the difficulty in the problem and create a solution to it. And I know there's been softwares created that actually help companies with internal communications and to keep employees informed. I don't know any, and I haven't worked any in my past. But going forward, in light of our current challenges, I would certainly go and do some research as to what is a software in internal communications that can actually really support the business from a communication perspective. The other question was, how would I communicate layoffs? So I would do both. I would do a company-wide communication, saying people what they know already. So there is no point in hiding information. Times are tough, revenue not coming in, workload has been reduced, and so regrettably the company is finding themselves in a very unpleasant situation where we're going to have to reduce the workforce. And then I would tackle that department by department.
Thank you for great answers, Berta.
Thank you.
I will also share the results of the poll. It seems like all of the attendees today, they have a plan in place for the Corona crisis. And when it comes to leadership on a scale 1 to 5, how far has your leadership style changed as a result of the crisis? It's a lot of people that answered the 3 there, and that would be I would analyze that as people has not changed their leaderships a lot, but a little bit. So it's a bit some adoption to the leadership styles during the Corona crisis. And we will go to the next question, actually. It's a very high-level question for you, David, but what do clients want at these times?
Well, it gives me the opportunity to define clients in two different ways. So first, let's talk about clients working with their agencies, and then I'll talk about the clients of a bank maybe. But clients with agencies are going to be wanting the same thing. They're going to want delivery. They're going to want everything done in safe fashion. So if you look, for instance, at the complexity of producing materials to do a TV ad, that's exponentially more difficult than it used to be, and everybody needs to be kept safe and secure. There isn't, of course, any insurance available to cover those things these days, so everybody relies on the team working safely. But I think clients have always been demanding more from their agencies, whatever the circumstances, and it's usually been better work, faster, cheaper. And under these circumstances, I think I see the best relationships working more from the basis of the security that they will continue. And what that means is respecting the revenue earning needs of an agency as well. So what clients want is what they've always wanted. Hopefully the best clients are being thoughtful about how they deliver that. What the clients of a bank want at this time, of course, is support, and that's what they're getting. Support, encouragement, loans where available. So it's great to watch all of the banks in the UK responding and giving people payment holidays when they need them, making sure loans are available. So I think clients are getting what they need, whether it's from a bank or clients from their agencies. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you so much, David, for your answer there. A question for Anne. How should the CMO and HR director work during the crisis? That is reporting to you.
Yes. Well, I mean, in my HR director is literally on the phone to the entire organization one-on-one every 2 weeks. So she goes through phone calls to every single person. We're a small organization, so that's possible. But I think that the main point of contact between the CMO and HR at the top is around messaging. And we've spent a lot of time, as I say, we have these all hands meetings, deciding what the messaging should be about. For example, should people stay working at home? And is that appropriate when some people want to come into the office and some people definitely don't, and some people are shielding? So what we've basically developed a series of high-level messages that essentially go out to the employee base, but also are part of our branding, which is basically, we are not going to insist that you do anything that is not something that you are comfortable with. And so the messaging around how we are conducting our business is really important to the employees, and it extends to our clients and to our investors and our portfolio companies. So, and the other thing that I think we've done with both is we've really ramped up our digital skills massively. We use Zoom for sure, but we also use Microsoft Teams, and it's basically like a phone call. And so we've massively increased our digital skills, even although we're a tech investor. And we did an entire investor meeting online this time, which was fantastic, and something that we've learned from and we've developed new skills around, and will continue into the next year. And then we've got all this material that marketing can then use from here forward. So it's really worked, dovetailed very well.
There are definitely some positive things that has come with this crisis as well. You mentioned the technology side of things. And I think we could actually go to Tom to the next. We have touched upon this earlier, but maybe you could elaborate a bit more. How much should companies invest into the future at the moment?
So yes, to the extent it's possible, I think the board should work to ensure that the company emerge from this crisis in a relatively better situation. This may include making cost reduction needed to cope with the crisis, but also reductions to make adjustments. This may mean reductions in certain area of the company, but a corresponding increase in other areas, for instance, product development. Some of the behavioral changes, the patterns that occurred during the Corona crisis are likely to remain largely post-Corona, like reduced travel, working remote, increased digitalization, etc. Therefore, many companies must also change as a consequence of this. We talked about this a little bit before. So, but if there is an area to invest during the crisis, if you have the sources, the sources of that, it's the product development, or alternative, at least don't downsize in that area. I think it's punishing in the long term. And in addition, there is an opportunity to relatively improve your position by investing in products during the crisis. So that's the area where I would put my money if I have it.
Can I just come in on that? Because I just wanted to, I certainly agree on the product development point, Tom, but I actually also want to make a plug for marketing, because several of our companies have found that acquiring marketing space, whether it's digital or media, has just become so cheap in this crisis that they've actually overinvested in their marketing and have grown their business more rapidly than they expected. So it really is dependent on what the opportunity you see for your business model.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. Of course, if you have a fantastic technology, maybe if you have the resource, you could put the money into marketing. But I agree. I just thought in general, if you have a limited amount of capital, I would not rather cut down on product development. But it's a good point. Great point. Thanks.
All right, so we have had this webinar for 50 minutes now, and it's time to round off. We will send out a feedback link for all of you. There is also a sticky note in your chat box, so you could give us feedback on the webinar. And that is everything from us today. We will also send out the link to the video, so please share that with other people that would be interested in this video or this webinar. And I thank you so much for attending this webinar today, and a great panel we have today as well. So thank you so much, David, Berta, Anne, and Tom, and I hope to hear from all of you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
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 Bye.